Welcome back. This is CCGPS 3rd grade unit 2. It is the one with courage and character in the making of America. And this one, goodness gracious, is jam-packed. I don't know how anybody is going to be able to get it all done. So I've taken an approach to looking at it with one of the schools that I work with, where they're departmentalized. So one teacher is teaching reading and one teacher is teaching science and social studies. So I kind of actually pulled the unit apart to where part of it's going to be addressed during the reading block, and then part of the task will be addressed during the social studies block. I'm going to show you what I've done with it, and then you take it and run with it and make it work for you. If you have your whole class the entire day, you may be able to integrate this a little bit better, but for the purposes that we needed it, this was how I looked at it and how I thought about it. Again, I think in 3-week chunks. That's just the way my reading brain works. You have 4.5 weeks to do this unit, but I did it in 3. So let's get started and let's take a look. At the very beginning, the introduction to the unit wants your children to make a prizzy. And instead of making a prizzy, I just had my children do a 4-door shutter that would go on the front, and I chose the 4 character words that they had there, and then I would have the children either give me a definition of what they think it means or find a picture from clip art, and then they would have just glued it down underneath here for each word. And then in the center is the title, Courage and Character in the Making of America. Again, like I said earlier, every blue book starts with a table of contents, and this one is no different. Also, guys, remember that this is a 3-week project. This isn't all done in just one day. My children worked on these things independently with their groups when my children came to me for guided reading time. So, one of the first things it wants the children to do, one of the first tasks, is to make a timeline of American history. Now, this book here is being used strictly in the social studies context. This is not being used during the literacy block. This book right here happens to be the one that's going to be used during the social studies block. This is the blue book with the activities that I left in it for reading that will be addressed during the reading or the 90-minute literacy block, and we'll get to that one shortly. One of the things I wanted them to do is to make a timeline. And so when I started on this timeline, my thought process was that we do 9 people in 3rd grade, and then I would give each person one colored strip. So this would be Paul Revere, and I would do 3 significant things in Paul Revere's life. Then the next person being Frederick Douglass, and so on all the way out into Cesar Chavez. However, the later it got, the worse my gluing got, and so then the colors started to run together. I think looking back now, I would have only have done Paul Revere, Frederick Douglass, and Susan B. Anthony, because for this 9 weeks, these are the 3 people that we're going to talk about as it pertains to this book. But your choice. And then I just used a simple hair scrunchie or rubber band so that there's stoppage, floppage, as we like to call it, so things aren't flopping around. Then the other thing I did was a quick flip book of other famous Americans. I just elicited it. Actually, I used my child who's a 4th grader and said, Natalie, name me some other famous Americans that you know. And she rattled off Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, Barack Obama, Martin Luther King Jr., Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and Jackie Robinson. And then underneath here, I would just write a character trait for each of these people and how they're alike and different than Paul Revere, because right now that's who we're comparing them to. One of the next things is, if you guys have these biographies, I like to get my biographies in during my social studies time. I just made a copy of the front. And then down here, this happens to be one of the tasks from the CCGPS unit that deals with the children being able to read poetry and prose at an appropriate rate and speed for 3rd grade. And so I copied the poem Paul Revere's Ride. And up here I did the kind, kinder, kind is the superlative, which is also one of the task adjectives for the CCGPS unit that I'm going to address. We could do brave, braver, bravest, and they all deal with this poem and Paul Revere and some of his character traits. So I took that piece out. I'm going to address it in reading. I'm going to talk about it in reading, but they're going to do it during my social studies time, just to take a little bit off my plate during my literacy block. Over here, if you have the Susan Marsh books that are absolutely wonderful, I wanted to make sure that I got those in as a great review for Paul Revere. So what I've done, and I know this looks hard, but it's not, is I have taken every one of the pages for Paul Revere, and they are put in here so that we can get them all in. They're all together. They will all be addressed, and they will all be completed in the course of a week or so during my social studies time. But this way I have them all together. They're all in one place. And I'm getting it in because I do think, again, that worksheets are not bad. It's just the way that we use them. In this great way, it's a great teaching tool in a review of Paul Revere. After that, it wants part of the CCGPS unit, wants the children to look at the Declaration of Independence. I really tried to find a great kid-friendly version. Haven't found one that I just absolutely love yet, but I would have taken an excerpt of it and I would have glued it here, coming down on top of this. For the children to read and for us to discuss. And then straight out of the CCGPS task, I copied personally. I would have taken and just had it printed off and let the children just glue it on the page. But they're to write a paragraph indicating whether they believe the vision of the Founding Fathers and all of the rights that the revolutionaries fought for were realized in America, or if we are still struggling with equality and liberty in our country. And so this is a huge piece of writing. And what I would have had them done was on this page right here, I would have had them write their rough draft. And then we would have come back and on our special paper, our final revision paper, this is where they would have written their final draft for me. So this would have taken probably 2 to 3 days to look at the Declaration of Independence, to talk about the Declaration of Independence, to address this question, and then to have the children actually write an opinion piece, do some peer editing, and then come back and write a final piece. So that would all be here. Now, I'm doing Paul Revere in the course of a few weeks. After that, I would move on to Frederick Douglass, and it's kind of the same setup. I made sure that I got my biography in, I got some timeline stuff with him, and some mapping skills in, all during my social studies. But Frederick Douglass is also going to be addressed in the CCGPS unit, so we're just kind of tying it all together. And then what I did was I found a part out of the biography. I copied this page literally, straight from there. And as long as you copy less than 10% for educational purposes, you're not infringing upon any copyright laws. So I took this, and it wanted the children to highlight verb tenses. It wants them to know about past participles, even though they don't have to know what a past participle is. It just wants them to be introduced to it. And then I took straight from the CCGPS unit and had them draw this chart, write present, simple past, and then past participle. And then this page happened to have some regular and irregular verbs that we highlighted in either yellow or purple. And then they would add them over here and do the tenses to it. Finally, I love this poster right here. It's an opinion piece. And I'd have the children cut it and then underneath here write from the perspective of either a slave or a slave catcher how this poster would make them feel. And that's what I would do for Frederick Douglass. And then I'd be moving on to Susan B. Anthony. I haven't quite gotten there yet. I was trying to get this out there for you guys to see. But this will be done during the social studies time. But it's pulling some of that reading out and putting it here so that this doesn't kill you in the end. We'll get to this one in the next segment. Thanks.